Trump administration officials are defending Susie Wiles after a stunning Vanity Fair article featuring a number of candid quotes from the White House Chief of Staff. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responding moments ago.
Example of disingenuous reporting, where you have a reporter who took the chief of staff's words wildly out of context, did not include the context those conversations were had within. And then further, I think the most egregious part of this article was the bias of omission that was clearly present. And we see a lot of this when dealing with the media every day. You will leave out important context, leave out comments and facts. You know, many people in this building spoke with that reporter, and those comments were never included in the story, probably because it didn't push this false narrative of chaos and confusion that the reporter was clearly trying to push. So what I'll say about our chief of staff, as you've seen from not just myself, but also the entire cabinet and a groundswell of support from people on Capitol Hill who don't even work in this building, about how incredible Susie Wiles has been to President Trump. And he's been able to accomplish so much because of his leadership and his tenacity, but also because of Chief of Staff Wiles's leadership and her ability to effectuate his agenda. So thank you.
Leavitt there suggesting that the author, Chris Whipple, was biased in indicating that there was chaos and confusion at the White House. Notably, though, she doesn't address the substance and the exact quotes that he uses, which she says were taken out of context. The two-part piece in question was published after 11 interview sessions with Wiles, and in the article, Wiles gives a pointed assessment of multiple top officials, including the president himself. Wiles told Vanity Fair's Chris Whipple that Trump has, quote, an alcoholic's personality, operating with a view that there's nothing he can't do, nothing, zero, nothing. On Trump's chaotic tariff rollout, Wiles is quoted as saying there was a huge disagreement over whether tariffs were a good idea. She believed a middle ground would ultimately succeed, but that it had been, quote, more painful than I expected.
Wiles has blasted the reporting as a, quote, framed hit piece and says her remarks were taken out of context. She did not deny making them, however. CNN's Kristen Holmes is with us now. Kristen, I think it's really important to kind of dig down on this alcoholic's personality comment, because there is actually a lot of context in the piece about it, where Wiles talks about her father having been raised by an alcoholic who she describes as having a very big personality. And that sort of informs, I think, her description of the president and how she, I guess, deals with him, maybe. What did you think?
Yeah, certainly. And President Trump actually just responded to this. He did a brief interview with the New York Post specifically about those comments, in which he stood by Susie Wiles, telling the reporter at the New York Post that he has full faith in Susie to continue her role, and that he has, quote, and again, this is according to the Post, a possessive and addictive type personality, so that he wasn't offended by what she said about his personality. One thing to keep in mind here, President Trump has relied on Susie Wiles in a way that he hasn't relied on anyone. Probably at any time in his life, certainly in his political life. She is there every step of the way, and he truly believes that she was loyal to him at a time when no one else was, after January 6th, when almost all Republicans had started to turn their back on President Trump, and she said that she would stay with him, and not only that, but eventually run his campaign for president. So there is no one that President Trump views as closer to him than Susie Wiles, and really, to a certain extent, more loyal. Now, it wasn't just about President Trump that she had some very blunt remarks about. At one point, she talked about the vice president, Vance, saying that he was a conspiracy theorist, and he had been, and talking about his transformation from an anti-Trumper to a full-on MAGA supporter, saying that it was somewhat political because he was running for Senate in Ohio. She also had scathing words for the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, in which she said that Bondi had whiffed on the Epstein files, essentially underestimating the importance of the Epstein files to President Trump's supporters. Now, I will note, Bondi is one of the people who has come out in defense of Susie Wiles. Now, one of the things to note here, they talk a lot. We've heard Susie Wiles now say this. We've heard the press secretary say this, that these remarks were taken out of context. Well, the author has told the New York Times that he has tapes of this interview. So what I was trying to ask her just moments ago when she came to the stakeout camera briefly for remarks was whether or not they were going to call on the author Whipple to release these tapes that they have, because if they're claiming it's out of context and now there's claiming that there are recordings, will they end up doing that? So no answer on those questions yet, but obviously this has really left the White House, and not just the White House, but Trump world as a whole, in a state of shock. I cannot tell you how many conspiracy theories I've heard about how this interview got published, whether it was the idea that she thought she was talking off the record, whether it was the idea that she was sitting for some kind of other interview that wasn't going to be published immediately, that it has something to do with the 2028 campaign, because Susie Wiles is a calculated and political figure. Everything she does has meaning. She is not somebody who seeks the limelight. She doesn't get out there in the press and do constant interviews. So the fact that she did this to so many people who are close to President Trump say that it must mean something. Now, of course, again, Wiles has said that that's not the case, that it was just taken out of context. There was an omission in much of what she said. But again, this has caused quite a stir here at the White House.
Yeah, notably, it's about a year's worth of interviews, so there is a lot of context in the piece. Kristen, we've also learned this afternoon that President Trump plans to address the nation tomorrow. Do we know what about?
At 9 p.m. tomorrow, and from Carolyn Levitt's perspective, she just said it was going to be a chance for him to tout all that he had accomplished in the last year. I was also told by another senior White House advisor that it is likely to be an end-of-the-year wrap speech, so expect him to likely talk about affordability, particularly as he is trying to change his messaging around that heading into 2026.
Kristen Holmes, live for us from the White House. Thanks so much for the update. We are awaiting, meantime, a news conference from police and prosecutors on the deaths of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, why they believe the couple's son Nick is responsible for their deaths.
And Doug.
There it is, Limu, the 50-yard line. Soon we'll be telling the whole stadium how Liberty Mutual customizes car insurance to save people hundreds. Whoa. Ah. Looks like we're walking. We'll get them at halftime. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
I told myself